Hello, Mr. Jack Suess. Welcome to the First Gen Student Network Humans of UMBC podcast. My name is Nuam, and I'm a sophomore at UMBC. And I'm currently working as a First Gen Network project assistant, and I am doing social media and the Human podcast. And so I will be interviewing today. Would you mind introducing yourself?
So, hello, my name is Jack Suess. I am the Vice President of Information Technology at UMBC, and I am a UMBC alum, class of 1980, and then I got my master's in 1995.
Thank you for your introduction. I was wondering, are you a first gen student?
Yes, I am.
Oh, that is really nice. I'm a first gen student too. As a first gen student, what does a first gen student mean to you?
So, I think everyone is a little bit different. What your life experiences were and things like that. For me, um, what being a first gen student really sort of indicates is I had no sense of what higher education was about or how to navigate it. And so, one of the things I really try to do when I'm working with students at UMBC who are also first gen, and even some who aren't first gen but are still having problems, is try to be offering, when asked and when appropriate, insights on how they might want to be thinking about taking advantage of higher education. Because it took me a while to figure it when I was a student.
Oh, that's definitely something that I really think is so important too, because as a first gen student myself, I didn't really know what a first gen was until I kind of entered college.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And for me, when I was growing up, I grew up in a blue collar area of Baltimore County. And probably in my high school, 80% of the students didn't go to college. Maybe even a higher percent, maybe it was 90%. Most of them just got jobs when they graduated from high school. And so none of my friends that I were in my neighborhood really were going to college. And so, I'm a freshman, and I was a commuter because we couldn't afford for me to live on campus. And so I have this experience of going to college during the day, but I'm coming home to an environment where none of my friends are in college. They're all working, and none of them, of course, had homework and things like that. And so it was an odd place to be in, sort of two different worlds simultaneously, where you're in college and you're trying to sort of manage this environment, but you're still in whatever world you were in. At least for me, that was the case. And having to sort of recognize that no one else has any idea what I'm talking about when I'm talking about different things or the problems or whatever that's
Yeah.
happening. And so I think it's a real challenge where you need people in the community who can help you and relate to that problem.
Yes, definitely. I think having like a community for first gen network being at UMBC is just so important for a lot of students because they don't really have that community and support. And so I think that is important to have that support and that community to just really go through all of the challenges in life, especially college together. I was wondering, like during your time as a first gen student, if you had like big challenges and like if you had a hard time.
So I think the first thing for me is the fact that um, growing up, and I think a lot of first gen students may have this problem. So neither of my parents had actually even finished high school. Um, they grew up and came of age during World War II. And so my father was, I think he was just about ready to finish, but he was at a trade school learning to be a machinist. And so when the war broke out, he was immediately sort of went over to Bethlehem Steel and the steel yards and started working at the steel and shipyards where they needed machinists. And so he didn't finish high school. He ended up later on getting his GED, but that was many years later. My mother, she left after or during the 11th grade and went to work in a factory because that was what women were doing, is they were going to help out because all the men, air quotes, were really being drafted and sent into World War II. And so neither one of them had this experience of going to college, what college is about. So frankly, well, I didn't even know how to apply. I mean, I applied to a couple of colleges. The guidance counselor helped me, but nobody ever told me I should go visit the college before, decide which one I wanted to go to. And so I applied to
Mm-hmm.
three colleges. I got into all three. They all had to be in state because I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford anything else, and ended up choosing UMBC. But I had never visited UMBC. I'd never talked to anybody who went to UMBC. It was just, I didn't, Towson was closer by, and a few of the people were going to Towson, but they were mostly planning to be teachers. And I thought, I don't want to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go to UMBC. And so that kind of thing where you just don't have the expertise of your parents and of others who you might, friends of families that could sort of guide you. That's often a problem
Mm-hmm.
for first gen students, is they don't have that network of peers in their family to be able to help them answer questions and know which way that they should move forward. Was that the case for you? Did you have many people, Loon, that you could be working with to be thinking about your college choice?
My college choices, I think I didn't really have that many people as well because both my parents, they didn't go to school in the US, and so I think it was just in high school, like my teachers and like some of my classmates were talking about colleges, and so I think I kind of applied to the colleges that some of my classmates just kind of applied to, and and so I didn't really like know much about these colleges as well. And so I can definitely relate to your experience being the one who didn't really have parents to guide them through college and like parents who didn't have who didn't go to college. And I think I just want to say your story is really incredible because despite all that experiences of you having not really having the support of your parents when it comes to like colleges or just like your community or environment, you were able to become, the vice president of technology at UMBC, and that is truly, truly an incredible story.
Well, I think there's certainly luck and good fortune in that. But one of the things I want to talk about, because I think it's often the case, and you ask about challenges, my first semester coming to UMBC, I had gotten through high school, and wasn't, well, let me say, my parents really didn't put pressure on me to get strong grades. They wanted me to go to college. They had always said that. Then my father passed away when I was 13. And my mother still wanted me to go to college, but my father was sort of the one that really had this vision of me because he was always impressed with engineers and he wanted me to go be an engineer. And so I was sort of lucky in that I had started into what would be the tracking for the college prep where you take algebra in eighth grade at a time and you take the foreign language. And so you're sort of in this pathway where you could be, accepted to going to college if you wanted to. And so I stayed on that pathway for the most part while I was in school, although ended up I by my 12th grade, I would leave school at noontime because I had a job. We just didn't have a ton of money, and so I was helping to earn money for, what I needed, because my mom couldn't really help out too much. And so um, that really sort of kept me from doing a lot of the experiences in high school that you might often do, like clubs and things like that.
Mhm.
Anyway, when I started at UMBC, I came here and I wasn't used to studying. And I got in and I was taking calculus the first semester. And frankly, I wasn't doing the homework because I'd never done homework in high school. I could always pass all the classes without homework. So why worry about doing homework in college?
Mhm.
And I got a rude awakening that semester when I got a D in calculus. And I want to say, one of the things that really helped me that semester was I was taking a Geography 100 or 101 class. And there was a professor in there who I had become somewhat friends with. And I did well in the class. I got an A in that class. And he asked me, he said, well, I was like, should I drop out? Should I go to the community college? I could have gone over to Essex and gone to Essex Community College. And he asked me, he said, well, did you really put in the effort? And I said, no, I probably should have done the homework. I probably, and
Uh-huh.
that kind of thing where, meeting a professor and talking to someone really was helpful for me. And that's why, I always try to say to students, and this is where I think the first gen network is so important. There's a lot of people who have stubbed their toe. You're talking about how impressive I am that first semester, I come here and I get a D in calculus. And, the reality is you can overcome these sort of things where you stub your toe. I ended up being a math major when all is said and done.
Oh, wow.
But I learned that I had to do homework. I learned that I had to develop study skills that I
Mhm.
hadn't really been forced on me by my parents when I was growing up.
Mhm.
And, that's where I think having a community that can help you makes all the difference in the world is, you know, ultimately getting into finding friends, getting into a study group, getting the habits down of studying. That makes such a difference and it's required. And, you know, the kids that often, and I use the kids and I think of my kids because I had the fortune that, I was the first gen, but I wanted I have two sons. I wanted my sons to be able to go to college and not have to work and not have to be. And so, we were in a situation where my wife and I could really guide our students, our children, and make sure that they had all the advantages, that they knew they had to be studying regularly, they had to get good grades in high school, all of those things that sort of help prepare you to get to college. Sometimes you don't have all those things if you're in the first gen because your life has been more complicated. And, and in some ways, that complication gives you certain advantages later on because you learn to deal with adversity. But it can also be that you've got to learn how to deal with what is expected and what you're competing against with other students.
Mhm.
How did you find it when you came to UMBC?
I think I can totally relate to your stories, such as having a bad grade, especially in math, because when I first came to UMBC, it was my first semester and I took Math 106. And during that time, I didn't know that I really had to complete all the assignments on time, and I thought that if I just work on the bigger assignments, maybe I would pass the class, but I couldn't really pass the class because I was lacking discipline. I wasn't disciplining myself. I wasn't having those study methods that works for me. And I was just kind of giving up at that point, and I was just having a really low time of my life. And so I, also had to like go to therapy because of that too. And I think I can totally relate to
Mm,
your stories in a way, and it is so
mm.
comforting to know that you have also gone through these things and made it to the other side, the end of the tunnel, and kind of use these experiences to teach your kids and help your kids and support your kids.
One of the things that I notice a lot with first gen students is that, and it was the same with me, is that we often had to work during to go, often, and it's not always the case, but often, families that first gen students are from may not have as much money that would be there, and so money's always tight. And so trying to often you're having to work part time or work, and help out. Maybe it's a you family has a store or has a restaurant and you're helping out in there. The idea that you have to be spending all this time at work can really be one of the pieces that is also a challenge because figuring out how you manage your time is
Hmm.
really hard. We often don't understand how busy some of our students are in what their life is. They're working 20 hours. I was always working at least 20 hours a week. And so, you're coming to class. Sometimes you're having to commute back and forth. You're having to
Hmm.
do work on the weekends or you're having to work in the evenings. And so figuring out, how you can find the time to uh, be able to do the work that you need to do is part of, I think, learning how you're pacing yourself. And one of the key things, I sort of learned was that I was trying to finish in roughly 4 years. And I sort of looked at the fact that, well, you've got to do 30 credits in, each year. But I would often take either 3 or 6 credits over the summer. And so, I would take 12 credits off in spring and fall because taking 4 courses was a little bit easier than taking 5 or 6. I didn't have that luxury to try to fit in 5 or 6, but then I would take 1 or 2 during the summer. And this allowed me to sort of spread it out and manage my course schedule. I don't know if any of that resonates with you, but I find that often, just sort of figuring out how you can plan your time is one of the real challenges in the first gen students and even transfer students, even if they're not first gen, if you're working, finding the schedule and the time management skills to be able to do everything that you're trying to do is just a real challenge. What
Hmm.
are your thoughts?
I just want to say that from when you were talking about, working and doing school, I just want to say that, I also, even though I'm doing like part-time for the project assistant of first generation network, um, I am able to have, more flexibility, and so I think I'm really lucky and privileged to be able to have that because other like you said, many other students, they're working full time and also going to class and also driving back and forth, and it is such a privilege that I didn't really like know much about, and like also like time management is something that I think every student should be able to work on and be able to help others and get the support and advice that the students need. And also, I just want to ask you if, like you said, you did struggle with many things back in college, and if you could, go back in your undergraduate days, I was wondering what you would have done differently.
So one of the things that you said sort of gets me to there is that um, it was in my junior year, I ended up being able to get a job at UMBC, and it started. I was just they had asked for someone to be helping an instructor as a teaching aide in a class, and it was a COBOL programming class, which we don't even teach COBOL anymore. But it was a course that a lot of students who were doing economics or business had to take, and so there were a lot of students in it, and I would help students with how to use that. And that led to getting a job on campus at that time in what was then called the computer center. That's we're now do it, but it was the computer, it was the term of the place was called the computer center.
No
And
computer
so
center.
getting a job where I no longer had to be driving back home and working at a retail place,
Mm-hmm.
being able to work on campus
Mm-hmm.
really sort of changed the way that school came to me because for one, um, the job on-campus jobs are generally much more flexible. We recognize so my division of IT, we probably have 80 plus students who work for us, and we really pride ourselves on the fact that um, students who work for us are there to be students, but they're also there to learn and they're there to apply what they're learning. And from that, they are able to then sort of benefit both ways where they're learning in the classroom and they're learning outside the classroom. But we always make it a point to let students, you know, jump out of a schedule if they have a class or during finals or a big exam, they can, not come to class, not come and do their work because we know they got to study. And that kind of flexibility just isn't there when you're working retail. And
Mm-hmm.
so once I got a job on campus, it really changed things. If I could do anything over again, the two things I would do is the first thing I would do is try to get a job earlier on campus. It probably would have been possible to do it a year earlier, and it probably would have made um, it even better, to be able to have that flexibility because now I could come, I could take my classes, often I could do some work, but I would be meeting other students over in the library and studying. And then I'd go home when before, because my home was on the other side of town. It was Parkville's basically about 25 miles the other side around the Beltway. And so you're not going to go back and forth too many times during the same day for that. So that would be one thing is really thinking about taking advantage and getting a job on campus because I think you can be around people who can also, you can ask questions of and who can help you in lots of different ways. So that's one thing I would sort of say around this. I think the second piece that I would say in overcoming challenges is just finding a faculty member in one of your classes and taking the time to get to talk to that person. As I said, that first semester here, I got to be, I would talk to the one geography professor, and I remained friends with him for all throughout the time I was in college. Whenever I would see him, even if I wasn't taking his class, he would ask me how I'm doing and check in with me. And I think you'll find that at UMBC, if you take the time to get to know a professor,
Mm-hmm.
they'll often be checking in on you, and that just sort of helps you because if you do need to ask somebody something, you can always go to them, and they can inquire on your behalf, even if you're not their advisee or things like that. So those are the two things of advice that I would say.
Those are really amazing, advices, and that is something me and Mesha'al can probably learn from. I know
Really,
that
it really
there
is. It really is.
and also I was wondering if you could give an advice to all the first gen students that are currently having struggling through their way to college.
So the one thing I would say is that this first gen network that's here at UMBC really cares. And a lot of times, I know last year I signed up for hours where they were just sort of like walk-in type hours, and nobody came. And what I would say is that um, if you reach out through the First Gen network, you're going to have a group of people on the campus who are really passionate about helping you and are on your side. And so I really encourage the students who are First Gen to be thinking about taking advantage of this network because this is a group of people, and I've put myself in the middle of that, that are really out to try to help you. And so, that really is just unique at UMBC because I think we still have a lot of people who care about first gen students, often who were first gen students themselves, and want to help.
Wow, those are really good advice. Thank you for telling us your experiences and everything that you went through. I know that it can be kind of difficult sometimes to share your experiences where you're struggling, and I know that so many students are so many students will be listening to this podcast and they will be able to listen to these advice, and I truly believe that it's gonna be life changing for them, and I think it's gonna also and comfort them in a way that they are able to relate to you in different areas. I just want to ask if you said that your major was math,
Mhm.
and how did you come to major in math?
So originally, I was thinking I was going to go be an engineer. And so as an engineer, you have to be taking, a lot of math in the first year or two. And at that time, UMBC actually didn't have the um, the final 2 years of engineering programs. We didn't get those programs until the mid 80s. And I would have had to transfer to the University of Maryland, College Park.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is I also realized I engineering required so much time um, that I couldn't work and really do engineering as effectively. And so I was looking at, well, what would I do? And I just sort of thought, I'll take mathematics. I've always been pretty good at math. And then I was just really lucky. It turned out that in the mathematics program, I was doing something called applied math. There was a track called computer science, which at that time I ended up doing the computer science track in addition to the applied math. And so I got a lot of computer skills. And I was just very lucky that it turned out in 1980. Um, that was sort of when the PC revolution and other things were being launched. And so, I was coming out with computer skills and they were incredibly valuable, probably more valuable than an engineering skills that I might have gotten if I'd gone on. And so that's the other thing I guess I would say to students is sometimes we come in and especially you see students that are thinking, oh, I want to be a doctor or I want to be X. And the reality is you can have an amazing life um, in so many different programs. And often when you look at what people who are doing great things majored in, they major in all sorts of different things. And so don't really feel bad if it turns out your first choice isn't going to necessarily work out. your second choice may turn out to be much better overall. And especially if you're passionate and good about it, good at it, you'll do great things. And that's what really makes the difference. I did have one last thing I wanted to just add, and that is that, I think sometimes first generation students, and I would have put myself in this bucket, um, we can sort of feel like being a first generation student, oh, that's a mark, I wasn't, coming from a family that had lots of college graduates, and so I'm not quite up to snuff. I look at it as a real accomplishment, and I think we ought to be owning it and being proud of it. Because if you're a first generation student and you get through college, you are changing the course of your future family's history. There's going to be opportunities, there's going to be a difference in the way that you work with your children, what your children experience. And we should just be proud of what we're accomplishing. And, I really look at students who've gone through as first gen students, and the tenacity that they have is going to make them great employees and is going to make them do great things. And so I look at it as just a real badge of accomplishment. And I really hope that more students actually think of it the same way and treat it as sort of a badge of honor.
Yes, honestly, so many students graduating as a first gen student is such an honor and privilege that not many people are able to do, because I know that especially in my country, Myanmar, so many kids right now, because of like the people protesting for democracy, and so many students are not able to go to school or continue their career. And I think that it is such a privilege that so many students here are able to start a life and experience college and find a career that will be able to provide and support their families and their future kids. And they're able to have the knowledge that not many people, not many students, not many people are able to have.
That is so true. And it's, it did now, well, that's just so true.
Yes, really is. Can I just interject like one question though?
Of course.
Can I ask, like, since you said that one big push to be like a college student is like your parents, if they have not pushed you like to be like a college student, would that affect you on pursuing college or like in being a university student? Because I know that you said that most of the people like on your community did not pursue like higher education. Would that have changed your decision if they have not like lead you to that way?
So, yeah, it's a really great question. And I think for me, what was really in a way, a fortunate thing is um, that, yes, they did push, and I think it did make a difference. And where it really made that difference is, so my dad died the summer between eighth and ninth grade.
Yes.
And at that point, um, my our life was kind of in more turmoil. My mom, had to deal, he had an illness. My mom dealt with that. She had been a housewife, um, you know, trying to figure out what we were going to do. She ended up remarrying about a year and a half later. Um, but, it was a really odd time. And I was just sort of lucky that I had been sort of pushed early in my life to be thinking about college and trying to do well in math and trying to do well in other things, that I just sort of flowed. Because when you started in eighth grade, as I said, at that time you were sort of tracked into certain things, and I just sort of stayed on that track. I didn't get A's in everything. I got B's and C's in a lot of the classes, and but nobody cared whether I got a C or not in a class. But the fact that I was in these classes that was sort of leading you towards being ready for college, I think was a real advantage for me, is that, that sort of push when I was younger. And so if you hadn't had that preparation, figuring out how do you get the confidence, how do you get prepared to be able to come in, that's an important element that, I think students need to be thinking about. And sometimes, it can be taking a class at a community college and realizing, wow, I can do it. I am, am capable. But if you haven't been challenged at all in high school, you might want to be thinking about that, because we have some amazing community colleges in the region, and being able to get that one or two classes under your belt and get the confidence that you need and the study skills down for what it's going to take can sometimes be the right stepping stone.
Well, that is a great insight. Thank you for that.
How about yourself? Did both of you, were you sort of tracking in towards college, or always sort of thinking that as you were looking at this, or was it, what was your story?
Mine is different in a way because before I already had like a few, I think a year in college in the Philippines before, because I just came here 2012, and that was I was ready. I started college in the Philippines before then, and the same as you, I also what do you call this? I also got pushed by my parents to like pursue an engineering degree. uh, but in the end, when I came in here, I found my passion to be like a media animator, and
Mhm.
then that's what led me to continue my studies here in America when I migrated here from because of my father. Now that's when I started going. That's when I went to Prince George's Community College first, and then I went here into UMBC.
Mhm. Yeah, when I was in high school, I wasn't quite ready to come and do engineering. There was a class that there was it was like tw out of the class that graduated 500 students. Um, there were 20 students that got to take this class called college algebra. And the college algebra class sort of taught you to be ready to take calculus your first semester. And that was what you were supposed to be able to take if you came to UMBC. And so in my um, in my spring year of high school, I decided to take college algebra at Essex Community College. And it was in the evening, the class. And so I just would, it was two or three nights a week, and went over there and took the class. And I actually did real well in it. So I thought I would be ready to come here and do calculus. I just wasn't prepared for the fact that, at UMBC, it was um, it was a more theoretical, and
Mm.
they really sort of challenge you. And so learning how to take tests and things like that took a little bit of time to sort of work through and understand. So any other questions that you have?
Oh, so I think I have one more last question, and that is, can you tell us one interesting fact about you?
There really are no interesting facts about me.
So, such as your favorite book or like favorite music.
Uh, it's a really interesting question. So my one factoid that I have right now, I was trying to look it up. So I try to exercise every day. And so right now my move streak of having at least 670 move calories on my Apple Watch is 1,420 days. So that in terms of books, reading a series of novels by an author, Laura Lippman, who is from Maryland. And what's really interesting in the novels is uh, she has a female private eye, Tess Monahan, who used to work for the newspaper and decided to become a private eye. And all of the novels take place in Baltimore and the surrounding area. And so it's just really interesting to sort of be reading the novels and, hearing it talked about the city and the county and the region. And so I've been doing those novels now for the last few months. And in terms of music, I'm relatively eclectic. Um, but since I grew up in the 70s and 80s, I probably tend to listen to more of the um, 70s and 80s, what we call classic rock on Spotify.
Oh, classic rock. You have an amazing taste when it comes to novels and music.
So,
Um, thank you so much for participating in our podcast. We're very honored to have you here and to be able to hear your story, your experiences, and all the advice you have given to us. And I hope you enjoy your holiday break.
oh, I will, and I want to thank you both for all that you're doing to try to be helping students. And I do want to end by just sort of saying to students, one of the benefits of having worked at UMBC for 40 years is I have probably the best email address of anyone at UMBC. So my email address is jack@umbc.edu. If any of the first gen students who are listening ever want to talk to me, don't hesitate to write. I'd be glad to set up a time and talk with you for 15 or 30 minutes and see if there's any way I can help you.
Thank you so much for coming here. I hope you have an incredible day.
Thank you so much.
I will. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Thank you.